You are going to end up having a quiz tomorrow that looks very similar to this. But it's not like a typical quiz that counts as a quiz grade. So it won't be like closed notes kind of thing. But make sure you're paying attention when I go over this because I'm going to take what I asked here and then ask more questions on it too. So initially here, what is our population? More specific, keep going. I've heard some good conversations about that.
That was the only one I liked.
And I like some of your answers better than maybe I would have said. I wrote properties for sale monopoly. A lot of people are talking about like all potential properties that could be bought in monopoly, anything like that. There's nothing wrong with the way I wrote it up there, but I like the way people are saying it better is like potential ones you could buy because that's kind of the way you were thinking about it. What is our explanatory variable? It said it in the wording of the given problem. And what was our response? And this one, I would say property cost and not just cost because it definitely said that in the problem. And I would have something like that's kind of my units is why I put that. Number of spaces from go that includes my units within. All right, so the next part said, what kind of association is there between the two variables? So I'm telling you now that if I ask this question up here, and that's all that I say, that means do this section. You would have to describe it by the form, direction, and strength. So really quick answers here. What is form for this problem? What is our direction? And our strength? How did we know that it was linear?
Scattered on visual.
And at this point, we didn't know this, but tomorrow I'll also need to do what? What else do I need to check to see if it's linear? Check all three requirements for residuals plot. So I wouldn't expect you to do this on that homework, but what are the three things we check on residuals plot? No pattern. The long one. Scattered evenly where? Above and below 0 for all values of x. And then our third one, relatively small residuals. How do I know that it is positive? And I know that my R and my slope are both of those were positive. Can one of them be positive and one of them be negative? No. And then my strength was strong. How did I know that? And what was my value of R? Now, initially when I talked about this, like we were first learning it, I wrote that, and then I wrote that that's between 0.8 and 1. You don't have to oversell that. Like you can say because that's your strength, or because that's your R, that's your strength. You don't have to go farther than that. Like you're understanding that you put it in the right place. Least square regression line equation. Again, I'm not going to be writing this tomorrow either. So I start this as y hat equals, what was our y-intercept?
67.28. 2827.
And then we already talked about the slope was positive, and it was positive what?
6.7, 8.5.
What do I need to do immediately with that? So this is our number of spaces from go. And I also need to define, so my first word of defining y hat is going to be what? Always.
Estimated or predicted.
Estimated or predicted. And then we already talked about y is property cost. And then so you go back and draw these on your scatter plot. I don't think I added a picture of the scatter plot. I can't remember. What is our R here? And I won't ask it as telling you what it is.
48, 7, 8, 0.
This was not on your thing. What does it mean? What does R measure? A linear relationship. So what kind of linear relationship was it? A strong what? One more. So that is all that you would fill in if I asked it this way. If we'd already defined x and y have a something, it's always going to be measuring the linear relationship. You just write strong, weak, moderate, positive, negative. Oh, so there's what your graph generally should look like. I don't have my axis labels on there. And then your line should look somewhere about like that. This one was not on your paper, but do you see any unusual points? Are there some that appear to, okay. Do you see any outliers? Possible outliers? How many possible outliers do you see?
4.
Definitely here, and here, and maybe that one. If anybody actually looked, did anybody look and see what kind of properties those were? It's all the railroads and waterworks, I think.
An electric company, probably.
That one might be this one.
Well, another one is waterworks.
But
And then the last one is boardwalk. The 400.
oh yeah, this one.
Yeah.
And then this one's boardwalks. I don't remember which is mine. I have marked the 3
I didn't know
railroads.
which ones are which.
I did that one.
Oh my god.
You can look back in here.
Yeah.
I seriously thought y'all had pulled out Monopoly board and figured
Where?
it out.
Say that again.
Was that the thing I was thinking about is other than the one right in the middle on that 200
This one?
line? Yeah, they're like all in a straight line at 200.
Oh, like
and
this?
Spaced.
Yeah.
The thing I was thinking is because they're evenly spaced, they're probably like before. This is for the railroad line.
That makes sense. And like I said, I didn't get into these questions on this. Now, when I ask it as a quiz, I will ask context stuff like that. Just to bring in Friday. Outlier or influential point, or both? Okay, wait, let me go out of order. Outlier, influential point, or both? Is it an outlier? Is it an influential point? Because remember this idea of it's pulling this right here. As soon as that snaps, is this line going to change? Yeah, it's definitely going to, it's being pulled this way, so it's going to adjust and
What would make it not?
be more like that. Oh, you can visually look at it until it's an outlier. Now, between this one and this one, which is more of an influential point? The one on the left or the one on the right? Why?
I don't know.
So we talked about that like swivel point in the middle, which is X bar, Y bar, which is somewhere around in here. So even when this adjusts and that moves, is this point being removed going to affect it as much as this point being removed? This one is definitely going to affect it more because it's not close to that center pivot point. Okay, R squared. What's our value of R squared?
0.7788.
This one should be easy. What does it always start with?
First one.
What word always? What always goes here?
And cost.
That's our property cost.
Can we explain?
And now for this one, I will go ahead and write this because telling you we're doing this as a review for your quiz. Can be explained.
Property cost. On spaces of go. A number of spaces.
So this is our what? This is and this is that should be probably the easiest one to do. And I'll type these. What is the actual value of the slope? 6.7845. So writing this out would be what? I would imagine some people will reword that as you get one space farther from go or something like that, and that's fine. Then what?
Increase by about 7, 8, 5.
And what should I put there? Because that's units for your property cost. That should be there. To increase by about $6.78.45. And then what?
For property, we're not taking.
And that just depends on how you, this part depends on how you define it initially. Questions on that? All right, and then y-intercept value here is the 67.2827. How does this one start? Again, wording however you chose to do it.
Was 0 spaces?
Some people are going to reword that, and I'll talk about that in a second. Keep going.
About 67.2827.
If I asked you to say, does this make sense? There are different answers that I could get that all made sense. What is an answer that would be a correct answer? Does this make sense? Yes or no?
No.
Give me an answer of why not.
At least in terms of monopoly, there shouldn't be a space or property on go because it's the go space.
So some people are going to say this as, this doesn't make sense because you can't buy go. What's another way somebody could justify this and not talk about it that way?
If I buy North Carolina Avenue, it says it's 300. It would not be 67.
But is that 0 spaces from go?
The space that's one for go is less money than
Now, that could still happen, but if you don't move, can you ever buy anything? So people would say something about that aspect as if you can't go anywhere, you can't buy anything. So that would make sense. And you can talk, sometimes there are problems like this where it talks about both aspects of it to justify, and that's fine. What would you do if I asked you this question? Plug it in. If I asked you about this spot, if this one were removed, what would happen? What does it change? So now definitely make sure you're paying attention to this. If we removed this spot, what would change? Just that one. What else? That's in the problem that I read above. So what three things would change? Slope, y-intercept, and r. How would, in this problem, for this dot, how would slope change if that point were removed? How would my y-intercept change? Would what? How would my r change? What does, in general, I talked about r measuring how closely I could put kind of two lines like this to encompass everything. If I take out any outlier, what's going to happen to how well I can predict them in the, like in a thickness? I'm going to be able to have less to cover than I did here, which means your R is going to go up.
But how did you know the R increases?
Just by that idea. If you take out an outlier, what's always going to happen to your R? It's going to increase. Because the smaller this is. So when does R become 1? I can't draw a straight line. R becomes 1 if it's a straight line. So if I take out a point, R gets closer to a straight line. If I take out an outlier.
I thought it was a straight line anyway.
And R right now is no. R right now is this, which is not 1. So it's going to get closer to 1 if I take out an outlier.